everyone out there in YouTube land, Dan here, aka the Comic Concierge. One of the most difficult questions to answer about comics is a very basic one. Where do I begin? With so many years of continuity, so many ongoing series, it can be a challenge to find a starting point. That's why each week I'll be looking at all the comics coming out, picking out ongoing series that are starting new arcs, as well as notable new number ones and graphic novels and trade paperbacks being released. So if you're a longtime comic book fan looking for a new comic to read, or you're heading to the store for the first time, this can be your guide as you look to pick up some new comics. So let's start things off by picking up and looking at the ongoing series starting new arcs. With Infinite Frontier now in full effect, we're seeing a plethora of ongoing series starting new arcs with new creative teams, including The Flash with issue 768. This is written by relative newcomer to the field, Jeremy Adams, and drawn by Brandon Peterson. And now, although Jeremy Adams has not written a lot of comics, he's written a lot of television and film, including the recent DC animated feature, Batman Soul of the Dragon. Now, Wally West fans have had to deal with a lot over the last decade, from him being a murderer, from him being dead, and now he seems to be retired. I guess that's a better option than both of those. How will this shake out? Will this be the Wally West story Wally West fans have been hoping for? Personally, even not being a Wally West fan, I hope so, because I think they really deserve it, and the Flash can be one of DC's best characters in the right hands, and seeing some newer comers, a brand new creative team, this is a great time to jump in, and hopefully this is welcoming to new readers. Also this week, Brian Michael Bendis begins his run on Justice League, and I know Bendis' name is one that brings with it a lot of baggage. There's people who love his work, there's people who hate his work, but ultimately I do think he is best served working on team books. He did a phenomenal run on New Avengers. That's really where I first got to know him as a creator. I thought the last great book he did with Marvel before he left was Defenders, and ironically, the person who will be working with him on Justice League is David Marquez, and they partnered for Defenders as well. That is a very different type of book now. Defenders was more street level characters, where Justice League is Justice League. You're talking about near godlike characters. And looking at this team, there does seem to be some familiar faces like Superman and Aquaman, although some different ones like perhaps Black Adam or Shazam or whatever they're going to be calling him, or maybe he'll just be the normal character. Who knows? Who cares? But ultimately, the key is, will this be any good? Will this be the DC book DC was hoping for from Bendis when he first came along? We shall see. This also includes a backup story for Justice League Dark, written by Ram V. And I do wonder how well these will go together, because with this being a new age for Justice League, but Justice League Dark has been going on for quite some time now. Will it be a new start for that? Will it tie into the Yellow stuff? I don't know. I kind of like this idea of combining teams and being able to keep a book going that may have been canceled otherwise. However, it may not make for the best reading experience for some people. It's an attempt to do something new that it is going to cost you a little bit extra to buy this compared to your normal Justice League book, as this is a $4.99 book, which seems to be somewhat of the normal price for a lot of the bigger DC books moving forward. Let's take a break from DC for a moment and go to Marvel. Captain Marvel, to be specific. And this sees Carol Danvers finally returning to present day. She's been spending some time in the future, and now she's dealing with repercussions of knowing what possibly her future may hold. We saw in last issue she's willing to make some personal sacrifices if it means the betterment of other people's lives. Now the question is, how will her friends react? Apparently, it's going to involve speed dating, which sounds exactly like a great issue for Kelly Thompson to write. It's something that she would probably excel at. She's great at character interaction, and quietly been writing quite the great Captain Marvel run here. It's been really overlooked, and I think it's because people assume a Captain Marvel run isn't going to be any good, because usually it's not. But Marvel's been looking for such a long time to get a defining run for the character, and 27 issues in, I think that's exactly what's happening. Now, this may not be super welcoming to new readers because it is dealing with a lot of past plot threads, but ultimately, I think this will be a good opportunity just to see the thread and the type of storytelling that you would get with a Kelly Thompson issue. I would highly recommend taking the chance on this book, especially if you enjoyed the film and you wanted more of the character, but seeing the character fleshed out in a creative way, and that's what Kelly Thompson has been able to do. We took a detour away from DC, but let's get back there again, as the new creative team for Nightwing also starts this week. And if there's any character outside of Wally West that needs a fresh start, is that of Dick Grayson. No longer Rick Grayson, no longer the character that has amnesia. This is Dick Grayson in all his Nightwing glory. And this looks like to be a very solid creative team with Tom Taylor and Bruno Redondo doing the creative duties behind this book. And looking at the preview pages and the art, this looks like a gorgeous book, just looking at those few pages. If the entire series can live up to that, this may be one of DC's best books this week, this month, maybe this year, especially when you have a writer like Tom Taylor, who has been one of the most consistently strong superhero writers over the last few years, whether he's writing titles like Deceased or really underrated books like Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. I think one of his strengths is that he gets to the reason why these characters have been so iconic, why we love them so much. He writes them in ways that feel familiar but not redundant. He's not trying to live in the past, but he's respectful of it. It's a very delicate balance to strike that not a lot of characters and creators can do. So if that strikes again, this could be another hit for DC, and it's one I think that all Nightwing fans, all Batman fans, and all comic book fans would be hoping for. The last ongoing series starting a new arc this week is Catwoman with issue number 29. And one thing that's different about this title, though, is that this is not a new creative team. Ram V continues to be in the writing duties, and he's been doing that for some time now. I enjoyed Joelle Jones's run on this book, although I thought when she left the art duties, it dropped off a bit and needed something to kickstart it. And I thought that's exactly what Ram V did. He did something we rarely see anymore. He took an ongoing title, he stayed with it, it did not get a new number one, and made it stronger. Similar to what he did with Justice League Dark. And I think you can tell DC respected what he did so much that he's now getting books like Swamp Thing. And he's continuing to write this title as well. And if you're a Catwoman fan and you've enjoyed something like the Ed Brubaker run with Donald Quick, I think this is probably the best run we've seen since then. Now, I wouldn't say it's that level, but it's as close as we've gotten in quite some time. This is Catwoman being Catwoman. This is not just Catwoman and her relationship with Batman. She's her own person. And in addition to that, we're seeing her relationship with characters like the Riddler in this issue, which should be a lot of fun. Now that we looked at ongoing series starting new arcs, let's shift gears a bit and look at notable new number ones debuting this week. One of the biggest issues this week, literally, is that of Ultra Mega number 1, published by Skybound Comics. This takes place in a world in which a virus is causing people to turn into massive kaiju beasts. And the only way to stop them are with these 3 individuals called the Ultra Mega. This promises to have massive action-packed battles, as it's 68 pages long, all drawn and written by James Herron with colors by Dave Stewart. So you know it's going to be a gorgeous-looking book. Something Skybound has really done a lot over the last few years is picking out those creators that are both writers and artists and giving them the opportunity to tell their stories, where you get to see one focused vision from one creator. If there's anything like books like Extremity or Murder Falcon, this could be something that's extremely fun with a lot of action and great to look at. Again, with it being 68 pages, it is a little bit more expensive of a book, but this is one where you're definitely going to get your money's worth if you like that type of story. One of Marvel's new number ones this week is a number one, but not really. What this is doing in celebration of Captain America's 80th year is going back to that very first issue of Captain America, along with Avengers number 4, where he was found from the ice and redefined as a new character, and getting some of the best artists today, from Chris Samnee, Steve Epting, Adam Hughes, a plethora, Adam Kubert, Pepe Larraz, people who have worked for Marvel currently, people who haven't worked for Marvel forever, people who have put their own stamp on the character, people who haven't drawn the character ever before, and having them redraw 2 of the most important issues in comic book history. They've done this before with things like Giant-Sized X-Men, and it's a fun exercise. It's not necessarily for everyone, because you're not necessarily getting a new story here, and there are going to be other tribute issues, but if you'd like to see something a little bit different, if you're a huge fan of art, if you're a huge fan of seeing the process of how things change depending upon the artist, it's a good issue to get. But ultimately, if you're looking for this to be new stories or similar to other tribute issues where you get a number of short stories written by different creators, that's not this. I'm assuming that's coming later, but this is just a reimagining of 2 of the most important issues in comic book history. And if you can't buy those issues because you want to send your kids to college and pay your mortgage, it's another way of viewing those in a way that's physical form rather than digital. So I guess for some people this will be a way to celebrate the character. For others, it may be something you would want to pass on. Let's go from Captain America, one of my favorite superheroes, to another favorite superhero of mine, Superman, as Superman Red and Blue debuts this week. And I know there are people who don't like these anthology issues. Personally, I love them. I've been enjoying Batman Black and White, Wolverine black, white, and red. I like the exercise of giving creators limitations, both in the length of the story and the type of art you can use. If you end up getting some incredible sequences that you wouldn't get in a main title that has to be kind to continuity or other events, this is a solo story. It's just allowing creators to be creative. And the big thing is ultimately who are the creators on these issues. The better the creative team, the better output you typically get. And for this first issue, it's not a lot of huge names, but names I'm excited about. Starting with John Ridley, who's been doing work for Next Batman. I really liked his work on the other history of the DC universe. The story I'm probably the most excited about to read, though, is Wesley Craig, the artist behind Deadly Class. Seeing him in the DC universe writing a Superman story, that can be special. He has not really done a lot of work outside of Image as of late, so I think this is a great opportunity to get artists like that. And also the creators behind one of my favorite series from last year, Coffin Bound, are also getting an opportunity to write and draw for the character of Superman. So, these may not be people you can put on a monthly series, but a short story for a single issue, your line, it's a betterment for both DC and comics in general. So I'm excited about this. Again, it is a little bit more of an expensive issue. It may not be everyone's cup of tea, but if you're a Superman fan and maybe you're not liking the current run or direction, this is a good opportunity to get some more Superman content without having it tied to other continuity or other series. The next new number one we're going to talk about is Vietnam Horror number 1, published by Behemoth Comics. And as a publisher, I think Behemoth Comics is really coming into their own. Last year, The Girl Who Walks Home Alone at Night, I think, was a breakout hit for them. One maybe they weren't even expecting. I love that movie, and I was actually surprised people reacted to the book as well as they did. It was super exciting. I don't know if people even know that's based upon a movie. If not, highly recommend checking it out. The next new number one we're going to talk about is Vietnam Horror number 1, published by Behemoth Comics. And as a publisher, I think Behemoth Comics is really coming into their own. Last year, The Girl Who Walks Home Alone at Night, I think, was a breakout hit for them. One maybe they weren't even expecting. I love that movie, and I was actually surprised people reacted to the book as well as they did. It was super exciting. I don't know if people even know that's based upon a movie. If not, highly recommend checking it out. But this is another new number one from them, another horror book. I don't know if it's going to reach that type of popularity, but it has potential. For one, we don't see a lot of books centered in the world of Vietnam, at least in the comic book world. It is, again, obviously going to be horror, dealing with tunnel rats, and I think there's a lot of opportunity there, because if there is a more horrific place than Vietnam, I cannot think of one. So I'm excited to see what they can do with this series. And I love seeing new publishers grow, and the more publishers we have that are healthy and can put out great content and can take creators that, honestly, that I'm not really familiar with, like this book, and make them bigger names, the better comics will be. The last number one we're going to talk about this week comes to us from Aftershock Comics. It's The Bequest number 1, written by Tim Seeley with art by Freddie Williams II. And where Vietnam Horror were newer creators with a smaller publisher, Aftershock Comics has been growing over the last few years, and Tim Seeley and Freddie Williams are 2 comic book veterans. They've been around for quite some time, have had established careers, and have done a variety of different books in a variety of different genres. And this book seems to be an unabashed fantasy tale, one that is full of wizards and dragons and anything you can imagine if you're a fantasy fan. If you love things like Dungeons and Dragons, Lord of the Rings, anything of that nature, this is right up your alley. And where does it take place? The magical world of Middle Earth? No. Hogwarts? No. How it takes place in, right around the block in Chicago. Although these are not characters that are dressed up like normal human beings, they look like fantasy characters through and through. So I'm curious to see, how exactly does that work? What is this world actually like? Is there a dichotomy of regular life and fantasy life? I'm not sure, but knowing Tim Seeley as a writer, he always has some fun tricks up his sleeve. And Aftershock has been having quite a year this year. They've had a lot of great new series debut, and I'm hoping this can continue that. And they seem to have a lot of faith in this title, because if you've read an Aftershock book as of late, most likely you're going to get a preview of this book. That tells me that they have a lot of faith in this book, and they want to make sure people are aware and give it a shot. And based upon their output this year, if they trust it, I think I have a reason to trust it as well. Now that we talked about weekly issues, let's transition over into graphic novels and trade paperbacks. And then after this, I'm going to talk about my personal pick of the week, the thing I'm the most excited for. I know people read comics differently. Some like weekly issues, some like trades, some like waiting for collected editions. Readership may vary, and my hope is to kind of help all those out. And if you're like myself that does a little bit of both, again, it's a good resource because it can get lost in just seeing what exactly is coming to stores this week. One that I wanted to point out comes from Archie Comics and Sabrina the Teenage Witch Wicked trade paperback. And Sabrina has been kind of defined by two separate personalities, right? You have the more family-friendly version we got in the TGIF show from the 90s, for those that are old like me and remember, or the more horror-centric character we got in the Netflix show that's one more mature and adult. And what I thought Kelly Thompson did with this series as the writer was find a way to kind of mesh both of those worlds where she fits. She's not super horror-centric. This is not like Afterlife with Archie, but at the same time, this is not like you're hearing a laugh track in the background because it feels like it's a sitcom. Kelly Thompson is a writer who can write teenage characters. Not a lot of people can. You know, you read those issues of Teen Titans or Young Avengers, and this feels like an old person trying to pretend to be a young person. It just doesn't click. That's not the case with her. So if you're a fan of Archie, if you're a fan of things like Riverdale and you like that type of vibe, I think you really will get that. As this also has guest appearances from other Archie characters. Although you don't have to be well versed in that world to understand it, everything there is for you right on the page. So Archie Comics is not necessarily as strong as I really used to be with books like Afterlife with Archie. They have a lot of delays and things like that. This is a book that came out consistently, even with the COVID pandemic. And if you want to read something a little bit different that's not a superhero, this is a good thing to pick up. The collected world is getting a double dose of Chip Zdarsky this week, and we'll talk about his first collected edition as Daredevil Volume 1 hardcover is coming out. And Daredevil has been probably Marvel's best or most consistent book since its debuted. And I mean that from issue number 1, really, because if you look at its history from Frank Miller to Ed Brubaker to that of Brian Michael Bendis, and more recently Chris Samnee and Mark Waid, he's had a lot of great creators put their stamp on the character, and Chip Zdarsky and artist Marco Checchetto, along with some other artists, are right up there as well. This has been Marvel's most consistent book since its debuted, even up there with things like Immortal Hulk and Thor, maybe larger, more exciting titles, but this captures exactly what you'd want in a Daredevil book, taking kind of the expected storylines and just tweaking them enough to make them new and fresh. So if you're looking for one Marvel book to get into, I'd advise checking this out because it's probably going to really scratch the itch for any Daredevil fan or any fan that likes those street level heroes. I mentioned we're getting a double dose of Chip Zdarsky, and that continues with this Volume 1 of Stillwater being released this week. And I think this is showing the versatility of Chip Zdarsky as a writer. You have Daredevil that is squarely in the world of superheroes, but Stillwater is nothing like that. In a way, it's actually kind of hard to explain because it doesn't really fit into one specific genre. Yes, there's fantasy elements to it, as this town exists where people don't die, but you really don't focus on those elements. It's the people themselves, as an outsider who used to live there has returned and is trying to understand what exactly is going on. It's a town that wants to remain secret. It's fearful of the outside, but it seems like that fear may be causing some crazy things to happen. It's built in a lot of mystery. If you like those stories where like one mystery leads to another mystery, which leads to another mystery, it's a good thing to read. Like this, I think this is really just getting going as we're learning more about these characters. Volume 1 was pretty good, but I have the feeling that it's going to be a story that gets better as the story builds upon itself and these characters get more fleshed out and get more complete. As the last few issues, I feel like have been the best issues of the series thus far. Let's take a trip back to the world of Marvel with the release of Iron Man Volume 1, Big Iron. And I do chuckle a little bit. This is Iron Man Volume 1, with this like probably Iron Man Volume 60. Ultimately, that's not super important, but what this does is collect the most recent Iron Man run, the first few issues that are written by Chris Cartwell and drawn by that of Kafu. And this has been a really consistent run for Iron Man. One of my favorite Iron Man books in a long time, one of my favorite Marvel titles as of late. I will caution that it may not be for everyone. It may be a little bit too slower paced, It's more looking at the existential understanding of who Tony Stark is. There's been this great relationship with him and Patsy Walker where it's not really a romantic relationship. It's more of Patsy Walker trying to get Tony Stark to recognize his own privilege and that struggle for him to do so. He's trying to become a better person, but sometimes he can't get out of his own way. It does have a sense of humor as well to it. And I think I might lose some people with this, but I do feel like tonally it has a lot in common with Tom King's run on Batman, the way they approach both their main characters. Story-wise, maybe not structure-wise, but tonally and in the way the characters are approached are very similar. So if you like that, maybe you like this. If you don't like that, maybe try it anyways, but I will just caution that if you want more of an action-centric, big, bombastic type of Iron Man story, I don't think that's what this is here to do. This is, I think, looking to do a little bit more, looking to make Tony Stark into a more complex, interesting character. And as someone who's been sick and tired of just seeing Robert Downey Jr. in comic book form, I love him in the movies, but how people tend to write him in comics, I'm glad to see a Tony Stark that is more resemblance of what he was before the film came out. This feels like Tony Stark of old rather than the more MCU version of the character. The last graphic novel we're going to discuss is Morrison Hotel, written by Leah Moore, with help from other surviving members of the band The Doors. And what this is not necessarily a history of The Doors. That's part of it. She is working with other comic book artists, a number of comic book artists, to create this anthology tale that looks at their history, their lore, maybe stories that happened, maybe stories that didn't happen, as well as their influence throughout their time and current time as well. Like an overall general celebration of this band. I think that's a smart idea, rather than just telling their history like an autobiography type of story, to go beyond that, go a little bit deeper. If it could be something that people who love The Doors may enjoy. As a person who's not really been a huge fan of their music, not people I hate or dislike, just I've not had a lot of experience with it, I'm just excited to see and learn more about them. And that's what I love about these stories and comics like this. People are like, oh, I don't care about The Doors, but it's, in a way, just great storytelling is great storytelling. And if this can follow through with this idea, I think it can maybe make you a fan of The Doors, or at least appreciate them in a way you didn't before. We finally made it to my pick of the week, the book I'm most excited about coming out this week. And it's not a new #1, it's not an ongoing series starting a new arc, or even a graphic novel that's brand new. Re-release of the trade paperback for Revolver. The reason being, this is written and drawn by Matt Kent, and 2021 is becoming the year of Matt Kent, with series like Crimson Flower, Fear Case, and of course, probably the biggest book of the year, Berserker. And my guess is DC saw that and it's like, you know what Matt Kent stuff do we have? Oh, that Revolver trade paperback series that was released under Vertigo. Let's ship that out again, because people are probably going to want more Matt Kent stuff. And if you read Berserker and it's like, you know what, I want more stories like that, I don't know if this will scratch that same itch. Matt Kent is not a storyteller where I think action first, but I do think of stories that will mess with your mind, and this seems to be a story that combines things like Slaughterhouse-5, Fight Club, and Inception. So it's going to be just that. And the art is done by Matt Kent as well. Some of his art may not click with everyone. Personally, I like it. I like the way he tells stories, and I have not seen a lot of his art. Probably the last time I saw his art was with his Black Hammer series, so I'm excited to get that as well. So ultimately, this is not necessarily something new, but I'm happy to see this released again, because it's one piece of Matt Kent's career that I've never really read and honestly did not know about until it's getting this re-release. One of those Vertical stories that kind of just went under the radar, but I'm glad now, because of the success he's getting, we're seeing a re-release of it, and hopefully that we'll see, other releases of other stuff he's done in the past as well. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this series. I'm hoping to keep it going as I'm trying to just find ways to provide services to talk about different books in new and different and fun ways. So let me know what you think. You know how YouTube works. If you want to leave a comment, like, subscribe, all that fun stuff, go ahead and do that. Thank you for taking the time to watch this channel. I know there's a lot of comic YouTube channels out there, and adding another one to the mix may not be the smartest move, but ultimately I enjoy doing this, and I enjoy just be part of this community, and I'm excited to be back and talking videos once again. So until next time, remember, comics are for everyone. The key is finding the right one. Thanks for watching.